completed meeting this afternoon, so thank you all very much for coming in. I don't think the roads are quite as bad as we had anticipated they might have been. Thank you very much. Welcome to today's meeting. Brenda Bridgewater Roads, who will send papers to us later. I will remind members that this is a public meeting and it is being recorded, so by taking part in the meeting, consenting to etc. being available. Okay, so minutes on the previous meeting, we proved that those are a true record. Thank you, Councillor Taylor. We were concerned that we hadn't seen you for a couple of meetings, so we were hoping that you were okay because you usually are a very regular attender. Councillor Tucker, yeah. Okay, thank you. Yeah, we noted that. Apologies for today's meeting.
Chairman, we've got apologies from District Councillors Benton, Boyle, Holmes, Kennedy, Jackson, Kay Perry, J Raven and Reed, and Parish Councillors Old.
Thank you. Are there any declarations of interest? Right, so we'll move on to item 4, which is a paper on Equality and Diversity Progress Report presented by Mrs Bridgewater.
Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon, members. By way of an introduction, this report provides an update on our Equalities Work Programme that's taken place during the last 12 months. So we're talking about 22-23 financial year. But the papers also set out next steps for this forthcoming financial year. So getting straight into the report, I'll pick up on the detail in paragraphs 4.1 to 4.2, which is on page 6 of your papers. And this provides some brief context concerning our work programme. And it explains that actually the last 12 months work programme follows an early review of equalities using the Local Government Association Equality Framework as a benchmark to inform the work programme that we've been. Paragraph 4.3 explains further that the key focus of that work programme has centred around 4 main themes, and that's included leadership, engagement, policy and communications. I'm pleased to confirm that we've completed all of the actions that were agreed, and Appendix A provides a summary of what these involved. Just to share a few examples with the committee, the work included a review of our management arrangements for equalities, and that included establishing a new senior equality steering group to refresh the strategic direction of our equalities work programme at the council. We've also provided equality and inclusion refresher training for all staff and updated a number of policies, and that includes a review of our equality impact assessment guidance. We are naturally, as you'd expect, reviewing and refining our community locality data in line with the census releases, and that's important for planning services and assessing need. And there's some examples of council-wide projects within the appendix that again link with this agenda, and I think a good example is a project in Locality 3 where there's a number of offices and services working together with education partners and with schools and with businesses to link up work experience and potential education and employment opportunities. And finally, I'm pleased to confirm our new website is being launched. This is a really nice, modern, slick online system. It'll make transactions easier to navigate. It also includes a new tool called Recite Me, and this is an interactive tool to improve access. It allows visitors to customise the site to meet their needs. So, for example, some of the functionality includes things like a screen reader. There's also a language translator and other functions. And the good thing about this is that the user can customise their preferences, save those settings, and that will remain every time they access the website. That's a summary of some of the actions we've taken today. Just turning very briefly to a little later on in the report, which is paragraph 4.5. This summarises some of the next steps that we'll be taking. So firstly, as members will be aware, there is a legal requirement for public bodies to review the quality objectives every 4 years. Ours are due for a review in 2024, and that ties in quite nicely with the timing for the development of our new council plan. The report also refers to the requirement to update and publish appropriate data concerning our workforce as well as our communities. I've touched on communities, but in terms of data for workforce, that's the subject of a report on the agenda today. We'll naturally be doing updates as census releases come through, and that's going to help us with mapping data as well, so that we can look at the detail of our workforce data to see how representative we are of our local community as well. And we'll be feeding through any appropriate actions as part of our performance management process as well. That concludes the presentation of the report. As always, I'd be more than happy to take any questions or observations from members. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Wendy. A very comprehensive report and presentation. So are there any questions, members? So, Mrs. Allen?
Thank you. I just want to ask how we're taking feedback on the new website, because it's fairly obvious with these new tools that are available. Some people will be changing their website to suit their own needs, but how will we find that out?
Thank you very much for the question. I will be honest with you, I probably need to get some further information from Andy Hoare, our Assistant Director, who's the lead on that. I am aware, though, this is very much from a lay perspective, that we can get all sorts of data from hits on the website and how people are using them. So I'm quite sure that data will inform that, as well as our normal mechanisms to get feedback from users. But if I may, I'll come back with a more detailed answer to members. I could perhaps email further information round to members of the committee once I've spoken to the Assistant Director who's got the lead on this. Thank you.
Just to ask as well about the interactive forms, because I'm very conscious that a number of people now only have a phone on which to actually fill in a form, and they don't have printers at home necessarily. And obviously, with the cost of living, one of the first things that's being recommended to people who've got expensive phone contracts is to actually go to a social prescriber. There are some internet companies who are doing this for mobile phones, and I'm just concerned about their access to the interactive forms. I think from my point of view, having a very small screen in order to fill in a form is going to be a bit of a problem for some of them. I don't know whether any thought's been given to this, but I did mention this at the time the website was being redesigned, and it's one of the reasons that I asked for a redesign of this some time ago when I was trying to fill something in myself, and I couldn't actually do that without printing it off. So has any thought been given to how people can actually use their phone to interact with these forms? And again, you know, we'd like some feedback about that, please.
Thank you. Again, I'm going to consult with the Assistant Director who's got the lead on that, and I will come back with the technical detail for members. What I can say generally is, as a council, our approach is obviously to try and provide as many choices of access for customers as possible. So where customers will find it difficult to conduct transactions or interact with us using the website, we will be looking to obviously continue to provide a wide range of choices to them, including where customers prefer in-person contact. But in terms of the technical detail around the access through the phones, I will again consult with Andy Hoare, if I may, and I'll come back to members with the detail to that question. Thank you.
Just to add to that, it is an issue that we are aware of. I sit on the project board over the implementation of the new website, and we had a meeting this week, and one of the issues was kind of in effect the resizing of the website and the form within that for different users. So we're aware that 80% of our users access our website via a mobile device. So absolutely, when we're looking to do it, and we know, because obviously you're aware, we're launching the website this week, we're aware that there are some teething issues with that resizing on different platforms, but very much being looked at as an urgent issue.
Councillor Mrs Hengley.
I need longer arms. Just to say that I went to the presentation of the new pages and it was brilliant. And I have had a go, and actually I got on and could follow things, especially planning, which I wanted to do. It was brilliant. So I hope you pass that on to Andy. It was a very good presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs Hingley. I must admit, I've been on as well, and I found the planning one much better to use. You can get straight onto the public access, and and you're there very, very quickly instead of going through several steps to get onto the area that you need to get the information and then to make comments. Thank you. Any other questions at all on paper?
We just make a comment to welcome the quality training that's been given to staff. Okay, I think that's a necessary thing for all large organisations anyway, and I'm pleased to see the details of it.
After no further questions, thank you very much for that one, Wendy. That's nice and succinct, and not many questions. Your next paper is the workforce employment trends.
Thank you, Chairman. And again, following a fairly similar theme on equalities, this report starts on page 11 of your papers. And as members will be aware, this is our annual employment trends report that we draw on for workforce planning, but it also covers our public sector reporting requirements concerning the publication of equality data. Just to clarify, the data snapshot for the report is the 31st of March 2022. So getting into the detail of the report, if I can turn to paragraph 4.1, which is on page 12 of your papers. This deals with workforce establishment size, and this confirms that at the time of the data snapshot date, our headcount was 323, a slight increase from the previous year when it was 300. And the footer within the report and the appendix provides further information in terms of what the full-time equivalent figure is, and also what the workforce size is when you factor in things like casual contracts and employment. Paragraph 4.2 and the appendix includes a profile of employees by postcode, highlighting that over 50% of our staff are also residents and live in the district. And then it goes on to show the percentage of where staff live around the surrounding areas, the most popular being Wolverhampton, followed by Cannock, Dudley and Shropshire. This is the first time we've broken the data down in this way, and this is going to be useful to look at year on year to see how that impacts on things like recruitment. Paragraph 4.3 is very brief, and that confirms that our staff retention rate is 84%, which is reasonable when you consider that at the moment a great number of sectors are really struggling to fill vacancies. And then the next section of the report moves on to look at age profile. This is set out in paragraphs 4.4 to 4.6. And I think the key point to mention here is that the data here is showing that we've made improvement on the recruitment of employees in the 16 to 25 age bracket. Of particular significance, we employed 9 people between the ages of 16 to 18, which is an improvement on the previous year when that figure was 0. So we're really pleased that we're moving forward with that. And we believe that the investment in things like our apprenticeship scheme are now coming through on the data and yielding some positive results. Moving on to look at gender, this is set out in the report in paragraphs 4.7 to 4.10. Now, overall, the gender profile of the council as a whole has remained very stable. Just under 39% of the workforce are male, and just over 61% are female. What we find year on year, the figures very rarely depart from a 60-40% ratio. However, there has been some change in our gender pay gap. The table in paragraph 4.8 shows that our mean gender pay gap for 2022 was just over 6.5%, which is an improvement on the previous year. But interestingly, we also have to calculate gender pay gap using a median formula, and that was just under 9.5%, which actually had deteriorated from the previous year. Now, there's lots of influences on gender pay gaps. Sometimes they can be subtle and cumulative, but we think there's two significant ones that are likely to have had an impact on the figures, particularly why there's a greater impact on the median figure. So firstly, as you're aware, during 20 and 21, at some stages we had a reduced need for casual workers and casual contracts due to the closure of leisure centres during the pandemic. So we had a reduced number of contracts, but as you can imagine in 2022, as we return to business as usual, those contracts increased again. Also in 2022, we had more female leavers than men. We don't know why, but it was double the number of male leavers, and that changed the percentage of men and women into some of the pay quartiles. So both of these factors have had a direct impact on both the numbers of contracts paid on the snapshot date, but also the percentage of men and women in the lower two pay quartiles. And as you know, significant changes in total numbers in a data set are more likely to affect the median figure than the mean figure. So we think that those have been a couple of key influences on the figures. That's actually really stark when you look at page 11 of the appendix. You've got a visual demonstration there that profiles the number of contracts and gender pay gap percentage across 2020, 21 and 22. Still on the theme of gender, next in the report, there's some information on gender balance in management roles. I'm pleased to confirm that we enjoy a good gender balance across our management tiers, and the table in paragraph 4.10 confirms that the gender distribution across our management tiers includes 24 females and 25 males, so very close. There's a slightly higher distribution of females overall in the top 3 tiers. And if you compare the figures with the previous year, we've had an increase of female team managers, but we've also had an increase of male assistant team managers. So the figures would indicate that our recruitment and our promotion processes and practices are working well from a gender perspective. Moving on to ethnicity, this is set out in paragraph 4.11 of the report. What I've reported on in the report is the ethnicity classifications, and I've indicated how that compares with the previous year. And going forward, we'll be looking at the census information on the percentage of economically active people by protected characteristic, and measuring that against our workforce figures to see how representative we are as a workforce, to look at any improvements we can make. But we are waiting for further census releases to enable us to undertake that exercise. We'll also be reviewing the ethnicity classifications to ensure they're in keeping with national sources and best practice, such as the ONS and the census descriptors. Disability is our next theme. And paragraph 4.12 shows that there's a slight increase in the percentages of employees that are disclosing they have a disability. This has increased to just over 4%. We believe that figure is still quite low and likely to be underreported. So we'll continue to try and improve those reporting rates, because we use this data to plan things like our occupational health service and workforce support. Moving on to workforce attendance. And this is set out on page 14 of your papers from paragraphs 4.13 to 4.16. And I think members will be aware that our aim as an organisation is to try to not exceed more than an average of 7 days sick per employee per year. That is only an aspirational target, and we do accept that sometimes these things are absolutely unavoidable. In terms of the figures, we came in at 6.22, so we exceeded that target. But the breakdown of that 6.22 figure was 2.35 accounted for short-term absence and 3.87 accounted for long-term absence. Now, technically, the 6.22 figure is an increase on the previous year in 2021 when it was 5.33. Our view is that the 2021 figures were likely to be artificially low due to lockdown and furlough. It's quite possible that both the incidence of sickness absence and possibly the reporting of it were perhaps suppressed a little bit for obvious reasons. Going back to the 2022 figure, COVID was our top cause of absence, and that accounted for 38 occurrences of absence, affecting 35 individuals. So when you actually take that out of the equation, our attendance was very positive. The stress, anxiety, mental health category is higher than pre-COVID. I would stress it is a broad category. But we do obviously look at certain categories. It's important that we get underneath and we look at the detail of those. I confirm that there's a lot of non-work related absences such as bereavement that are caught up in that category. But obviously it's important that you know that we look at the figures, and if things increase, we do look underneath at the detail to identify if there are any particular adjustments or workforce support we need to look at. Paragraph 4.17 to 4.18 highlights some of our developments around things like improved ways of working and our work around employee wellbeing. Members will be aware that we developed a new health and wellbeing strategy and an online wellbeing hub with lots of resources for employees. We also invested in a new employee benefits scheme at no cost to the council to support financial wellbeing, where that provides not only wellbeing information but things like a range of discounts for employees and offerings. We were very pleased last year that we got a certificate of excellence for MyEasy to recognise this work. 4.19 of the report also touches on workforce culture. And one of the ways we measure this is we carry out employee surveys. We conducted a survey last September. We were really pleased that 93.5% of respondents said that they would recommend us as a place to work. And there were lots of positive comments and high ratings around things like fairness and people feeling valued. Finally, the appendix to the report is the document that we will publish on the council's website. And that includes some planned equality workforce actions going forward around for the next 12 months. And just to give a few brief examples to the committee, there'll be work around improving our data and information about why people leave, because it's important that we focus on retaining our talent. There'll be reports on things like recruitment and selection by success rate and by protected characteristic, again to identify are there any gaps, are there any areas we can improve upon. We'll be updating our data categories in line with national sources, as I indicated, and further work is planned on improving our links and opportunities with schools and education partners. We've done a lot of work recently around really trying to get lots of work experience placements and support students in local schools, and we'll be looking to build on that. That concludes the report, and again I'd be more than happy to answer any questions or take any observations or suggestions from members.
Thank you, Wendy. That was again very succinct and very comprehensive at the same time. So thank you for that. Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Wendy. There's impressive stats, and I particularly like the 84% retention rate. I mean, I think a lot of organisations will be very, very proud of that. I think the whole team should be, and also the fact that the apprenticeships being created for young people are very, very welcome, and everyone deserves great credit for that. Is there any sort of comparison with sort of outside organisations as to retention? Are there any stats available on that? How do we figure?
Thank you for the question. It's an excellent question, and I will be honest, I've struggled getting recent comparative up-to-date data. I've currently got a request with the Local Government Association to identify if they've got any up-to-date data, or if they could engage in any data collection exercises. Because the difficulty is the recruitment market has changed drastically. And also, in terms of comparative data, district council data is much more relevant to us, because obviously some councils that are social services, that could possibly not be the best benchmark for us. I have got some data, but it's not recent. It's around 2017-18. And at that stage, the LGA were quoting average retention dates as 85%. So this is very anecdotal, but based on that and the fact that we know that we've got a very challenging recruitment market across a number of sectors, including local government, we're pleased with 84%. We won't rest on our laurels there, because the recruitment market is very challenging. So obviously it's something we have to keep under review, because it's very competitive.
Thank you. I know that there are very challenging parts of public services, from personal experience, particularly things like social workers, planning officers. It seemed to be very short supply to get hold of good planning officers. So I think we're doing quite well. And our own recruitment has been pretty good in terms of planning officers and specialists like the environmental specialist, etc. Yep. So now there were some hands going up again. Yep, Dr. Taylor.
Right for us. Oh, is that right?
Yes.
Yes. Three questions, unless I'll do not separately. Does your workforce attendance include maternity leave and paternity leave? And is that a separate subject? And what is the situation with that?
Thank you for the question. We don't include that in sickness absence figures. That's a separate category. I haven't got that information at my fingertips, but I can certainly follow that up following the committee by email to members.
The second one was your ethnic proportion, ethnicity. How do these compare with the ethnicity of the population in South Staffordshire? Is it quite representative, or is it skewed?
Thank you for the question. It's a really important point. That's an area that we are looking at. It's difficult to answer the question at the moment because we are still waiting further release of the latest census figures. And we have a release of ethnicity data. We also have a release of economically active data, but what we're waiting for is for that data to be cross-tabulated, and then we can compare it against these figures. And that's absolutely one of the areas that we want to do to see how representative we are. Ties in a little bit with the earlier comment that I made, that one of our actions will also be to report on recruitment success rates by protected characteristics as well, to see if there's any gaps in our processes and any actions that we need to take.
I'm getting towards the end. How many of the apprentices are taken, what proportion of apprentices are taken on by the council after they finish their apprenticeship?
Thank you. We currently, it's a difficult question to answer because we have a very different number of apprentices year on year, but we currently have 12 apprentices and 1 graduate. But out of that figure, that's the number of people that are studying a qualification under the levy. So some of those will be existing employees. So again, if I may, I'll probably need to get back to you with the exact figure in terms of the rate. I would say overall it's very positive. We always make every attempt to try and seek employment for people at the end of the apprenticeship, because that's part of our, obviously that's part of our recruitment and succession plans. But I will get back to you with the exact figures.
Sorry, one more, just one. Is a general point, which is awfully rude. It's a fascinating document, and you do an awful lot of hard work, and it's most interesting. But the cost to the council of producing all these figures must be actually enormous. And how much of it is because you are a good counsellor, you're collecting all things, or how much is actually required by legislation that you've got to produce?
Thank you. I think it's an entirely valid question. We're actually reviewing our data. One of the positive things is that our systems generate a lot of this data, so we can extract it fairly easily. But we are reviewing our data, and it is likely going forward, it's going to be quite slimmed down, because what we want to do, we want to very much focus on outcomes. A lot of this data is recommended practice as a result of the public sector equality duty. It's obviously important that we publish some of it, but again, we want to move more to an outcomes focus and link that more to metrics. So I think that's a very fair question, and yeah, certainly that's something that we're looking at the moment. Thank you.
Councillor Mrs Allen.
Thank you. Just a few things. First of all, we see a lot of statistics, but no comments ever about those who are dissatisfied with their work in some way. It would be nice to note some of those reasons, and perhaps the reasons for leaving ought to be given to members as well, so that we can see where we have a retention problem. Secondly, the disability employment is very low at 4%. What are we doing to encourage young people who are coming in under the apprentice scheme who have disability, or those who are coming in on work experience with a disability? Are we encouraging anyone with a disability to undertake any of those activities? And are we generally advertising our jobs in such a way as to attract people with a disability? Thinking across a very wide range of people here. Thirdly, since 50% of our staff live in the district, is there a real opportunity, thinking about the climate change agenda, to actually do something to link up with their transport to and from work? And has that been thought about in any kind of depth? And lastly, I noticed this pay gap differential, the median 9.5%. Is that a high median for us, or is that just our own, or is that a national statistic? Thank you.
It's quite okay. Thank you. So, taking each of those questions in turn, I think the first point I want to pick up on related to retention rates and reasons for leaving, which I think is an excellent point. We do capture information about satisfaction in the survey, but in terms of retention, one of the areas that we've identified, and that's going to be an action for us taking forward, is we want to improve our exit interview scheme, because sometimes we don't always get a response to a questionnaire. So that's something that we're going to be doing differently this year. And what we'll be doing differently is that I personally will be asking for a discussion with every employee that puts in a resignation letter to have an informal, confidential discussion, because sometimes it's important to have the conversation, get underneath some of the questions in a questionnaire, so we can identify if the people are leaving because it's an excellent opportunity, or if there is something that we can do differently about our workforce support, our culture, our promotion opportunities, or anything along those lines. It's certainly a method that works very well with induction. Our chief executive meets every single employee on induction, so we're wanting to replicate that process to try and get greater feedback from leavers. I think the other point that you made was around the disability figure being very low. It is very low. I don't believe that that's a real figure of 4%. We think that actually people are not disclosing that figure. They do that for a variety of reasons. In terms of actions that we've taken to try and improve on that, we periodically, obviously, write out to the workforce to explain why we're collecting that data, and that we use that data to try and improve workforce support. It helps us consider things like adjustments that people may need. And as I say, the figures crept up a little bit, but not sufficiently. The other exercise that we undertook is that I personally contacted people that had disclosed that they'd got a disability to actually say, you have disclosed, thank you. Are we doing enough for you? Are there any extra adjustments or support that we could put in place? Because I think it's important people understand that when they do disclose, we do have a conversation and we do get feedback. So it's something that we've got to work hard at. I know you also referenced around people with disabilities, possibly for work experience placements as well as employees. Certainly, we pride ourselves on being a supportive organisation. We've had a number of colleagues that have come to us on work experience with a range of disabilities, where we've put adjustments in place. And I know there's certainly one or two that have also gained employment with us as well beyond that work experience placement. And we've also recently signed up for the disability confidence standard as well. So that is something very important to us. But equally, we recognise it's something that we need to continue to work on and improve on. And I think the other question that you asked me related to climate change. And one of the aspects of our new employee benefit system that we've invested in is something called salary sacrifice, where employees can buy products more cost effectively through monthly payroll. And because there's tax and NI savings by doing it in that way. And some of the products on offer will be things like cycle to work scheme as well, to try and really push the green agenda and green vehicles. And I think in terms of work experience, that's certainly something obviously we couldn't open that scheme to them, but that's something we'll certainly give a lot of consideration to look at how can we make that green friendly in terms of how they can access work experience placements with us, and we'll try and keep our eye on that agenda too. We'll need to work through that detail and obviously liaise with our school partners on that. But it's a very good question, thank you. Can I just check that I have covered all of your questions? Okay, thank you.
Final thing, please, which is, if you look around the members, I think you'd have found a number of disabilities, and particularly for one person, I did actually feel an intervention was required. That person has had difficulty in speaking for some length of time. And I think some thought needs to be given in the new council to looking across the members as well as the staff.
Thank you. I know previously we've conducted a wellbeing survey for members. We'll perhaps take that away as officers and look at if we could obviously look at that in more detail, including perhaps getting more data so that we can obviously have those discussions and make sure that we inquire about any individual adjustments that might be needed. So I will take that away and we'll consider that. Thank you.
Yeah, I had also considered about the disability aspect of employment as one of my areas of particular interest, particularly in terms of special needs. It's very, very difficult to place people with special needs, learning difficulties into any sort of employment. And particularly, with the systems that we have, when they reach the age of 19 at school, they tend to drop off a cliff edge then. And then when they get to 25, it's an even bigger cliff edge, and they tend to be neglected in society. Unfortunately, organisations like Remploy that used to get quite a lot of government assistance don't get that assistance anymore. They used to do an excellent job in terms of supporting young people and adults with difficulties, either physical disabilities or learning difficulties, supporting them in society to lead useful lives and lives with respect, not being put into sheltered accommodation and that sort of thing. So I do have some interest there. I mean, there are organisations that do work in terms of trying to place people, particularly young people, like Shore Trust, for example, who work together with employers to find that sort of location. And I've lobbied for a long time, along with others, to try to change our system in terms of support for young. Are there any other questions? Councillor Hingley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The government now seem to be pushing people that are older, where we're short of employment. Do you think the council would possibly take that on board?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I don't think that policy would change our approach as a council, if I'm honest. Age would not be a barrier. I think it's about suitability of employment, and what we try and do is to ensure that our jobs, we can obviously in some jobs employ very flexible working patterns to accommodate people's needs. So absolutely, as I say, I don't think that policy would change our approach. Our doors would be open.
Any further questions? No? Well, thank you very much, Wendy. I think that's your session completed. You're quite welcome to stay, or if you wish to leave, if you've got other pressing matters, then that's fine. But thank you once again for, again, a very informative session with us. And some questions have been raised, which shows that members are very interested. And we look forward to receiving the information that you promised to supply to members, and hearing perhaps those of us that are around in the future what happens with our employment and other things like disabilities, etc. So thanks very much. Right, we will move on to the final paper, which is the corporate health and safety update. So Jenny Rhodes, would you like to present that?
Thank you, Chairman. The purpose of the report this afternoon on corporate health and safety is to advise on the work that we've undertaken over the last year and to seek support for the work that we plan to take over the coming months. As many of you will be aware, we have an established health and safety steering group which meets every 6 weeks. That's chaired by myself, but it is attended by various representatives from across the authority, particularly from what we class as the higher risk areas, the higher risk teams. So things like leisure, street scene, grounds maintenance, we make sure that they're represented at that meeting. And we also have members there from ELT, CLT and elected members as well. We continue to maintain a health and safety area on the core, which is where we keep all the documents relating to health and safety, so they are viewable by staff, and that includes the minutes of the health and safety steering group as well, so that's open to all. So moving on to paragraph 4.2, over the last year, we've had quite a focus on first aid provision and fire marshal provision. As we've come back into the community hub, as it's reopened and fully occupied, we've had quite a focus on making sure that we have sufficient first aid cover on a daily basis, and that we have fire marshals as well, including chief fire marshals, who are able to make sure that we meet our responsibilities in relation to any evacuation that we need to do of the premises. We've also trained those fire marshals and first aiders in undertaking the evacuation chair use. So this is for those, we talking about disability, but that for those who are immobile, who aren't able to use the stairs, obviously, particularly in the event of a fire, we wouldn't let them use lifts. So it's been able to get them out of the building safely, and there are safe refuge areas on the landing where they can summon assistance. And we've trained these individuals now. It's a little bit daunting. It's a little bit like a stretcher type thing, and you almost bump it down the stairs. So it's a bit of a leap of faith to do it, but we've got people fully trained and able to undertake that now. We also continue to maintain the first aiders and duty officers in the leisure centres and at Baggeridge. Chief Fire Marshal training, we've done an update on that as well recently. Lockdown policy, we've had a working group working on a procedure that we would implement in case of any incident in the community hub. That's been a little bit more challenging because it includes not only our own staff and getting messages out to our own staff, but also making sure that all tenants and any occupier of this building is kept in the loop with that and is informed as quickly as our own staff would be. It's been built around the guidance issued by Protect, and that is just in the process of final approval at this point in time. We've installed a security barrier in the reception area. So this is to keep all areas of the hub safe, particularly on a Saturday when not all of the building is open, but say the library and the doctor's surgery is open, that the other areas are kept secure at that time. And the team have supported customer services with the implementation of risk assessments, particularly for the welcome desk function. Moving on to trees, you will probably be aware that we've recently appointed an officer who is now responsible for looking at the trees for which we have responsibility across the whole of the district, and depending on the prioritisation, depending on the risk, once those trees have been surveyed, the work is then prioritised to do any repair works that need to be done to the trees. Construction projects across our estates, we have several construction projects which are ongoing at the moment. They are managed by the enterprise team, and we do still have responsibility, even though those works are contracted out. We have some responsibility ourselves, and we ensure that there is an external verification and monitoring of those works, and I'm very pleased to say that recently the works at Wombourne had an extremely complimentary audit report. Audiometry and hand-arm vibration assessments. We're required to do these for our staff who are exposed to either noise or hand-arm vibration through their work with us. Generally, that's if they're using power tools, so anything like strimmers, chainsaws, that type of role. We've undertaken those appropriate assessments, and if any adjustments have been required, we've implemented those, and we monitor that exposure very closely. And also, to negate the risk entirely, we also review all the equipment that we purchase now, and where possible, we're moving a lot more towards battery machinery rather than the petrol operated machinery. Going back to last year, we had 2 or 3 fairly large events for us that we were responsible for, including the Queen's Baton Relay, the community hub opening here, and the time trial event as well. And the team really supported those events to ensure that they were delivered safely and successfully, and liaised with safety advisory groups, which particularly for the time trials and the baton relay, that included not just across Staffordshire but across the wider West Midlands region as well. And some of you I know attended our training that we did in personal safety for elected members. And I'm really pleased that we were able to do that in partnership with Local Government Association. And that also included some tips and hints on online safety as well. The risk assessments and policies, we continue to undertake and review those on a regular basis. I've already mentioned this afternoon maternity. We're required to do maternity risk assessments at least twice through a period of maternity for expectant mums. And we do all of those risk assessments and implement any recommendations from those. And again, linking very closely to what Wendy said, we have supported with a number of adjustment assessments for staff with disabilities and helped to implement reasonable adjustments for those staff. Particularly, we have some with sight and hearing difficulties. And we've also undertaken some occupational health risk assessments for example, cases of asthma, and ensured that controls are put in place in relation to those. I'm pleased to report, accident-wise, in paragraph 4.2, that there have not been any significant reportable accidents. I have mentioned that there was an incident back in December where one of our open waters was iced over. It was a very cold spell, similar to at the moment. The member of public was safely rescued, and we were compliant in what we were doing, but unfortunately the dog who ran onto the ice very sadly passed away. But it has, you will probably recall that there were a number of incidents in December with drownings, not in South Staffordshire area, but not very far from here, and that led us to review what equipment that we provide, particularly the life-saving equipment, and how we secure that, and making sure that it is available for use should it be required. In relation to resourcing, due to the structure of the team altering slightly, we have tried to recruit to a part-time role for a health and safety advisor. Up until now, we haven't been successful, but we are reallocating some resource from within the team to cover that function. So going forward into next year, we'll continue to support the construction projects, including the Wonbourne development and the leisure centre refurbishments. And continue to review all of the health and safety policies, including the overarching health and safety policy, which is due for review as well now. So that's on the schedule of work for this coming year. Thank you. That concludes the report, but happy to take questions.
Thank you, Jenny. When you were giving your presentation there, I was reminded of when you talk about the evac chair, reminded of the days when I worked for the health service, and me and my team, we were quite peripatetic, so we were always included in fire training whichever hospital site we were on. And I'm not sure what hospital beds are like these days, but in those days the mattresses used to have loops on, and that you could bundle the patient up in the bed, secure them on the bed, and then grab the handles at the end of the mattress and yank them off the bed onto the floor, which always seemed quite a violent sort of procedure for us. But you could bet your life that the officer who was dealing with this training always chose the largest person in the group to get in the bed and be the guinea pig for this. And yeah, I could tell you some other stories as well, but I won't do. Are there any questions from members? Councillor Mrs. Bolton.
Thank you. Just a quick question. How many DFIBs have you got in? And are all your staff trained to use them?
Thank you. So we've got one DFib, which is located just outside the building here, so it's accessible not just for ourselves, but to the community as well. Not all staff, all the first aiders are trained in using them, and we have offered training, a sort of awareness training, to all members of staff and to elected members as well, if they want to just run through it. But personally, I've never used one. I'm told it actually talks you through it now. So I know it's about confidence, isn't it, to do it, but I'm told that it is an easy process now. Thank you.
Councillor Mrs Owen?
Sorry. I almost think it's mandatory that every single person should be able to do CPR and use a DFib.
In fact, training was available to those of us who came in as new members, and I think that will be another way of actually spreading the word. Several things really. First of all, one of my residents came in to the new hub and could not find the reception desk because it no longer exists as a desk. I am a little bit anxious about the person who sits at that desk, because now that the police are in this building, I think it's quite possible that some people may come in with a rather more hostile attitude, maybe at times. And I've stood behind people twice at the desk when someone's come in with a great deal of aggravation about planning application and waving their arms about. And I do think that person's rather vulnerable at the moment. So A, there's no label on that desk to say this is a reception desk. And B, that person, I feel, is vulnerable to the public. So that's a general point. Parish councils are having a great deal of problems in reviewing all their policies for health and safety, as you know. We have to review them annually. Is it possible to produce from the district council a recommended list of the policies that they require? Because I do feel some councils, we're treading through ours at the moment in Purton, some councils do not have adequate policies at the moment, and I think it's for the district council that have professionals to perhaps offer some recommendations about that. When we have some new members in, please do the personal safety stuff with them again, and particularly the social media. I think that was invaluable to everybody here. I note that personal details on the new website have been edited some, and I think that's something which people ought to be able to indicate whether they wish to have their personal details revealed or not. And lastly, about life-saving equipment, sadly in Purton, we frequently find our life belts floating in the lakes. One of our life belts actually faces the lake, which is not the most practical way of approaching it. You have to climb over a fence and walk around the other side of it. And I don't know whether there's any kind of safety clips or some other device that would mean that that life belt was rather more securely attached. If there is such a thing, I think we very much welcome that across the board. I note that we had children walking on the ice in our area. Sadly, our lake is very muddy, so if they do actually tumble in, they'll have a great deal of difficulty in walking out. And I think, I'm sure we're not the only community with that kind of a problem at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. I know that my own parish council, we did take advantage of the services provided by the health and safety teams here, and we did a review some time back on all our health and safety policies, which we found very useful, and the learning from that we've been able to use ever since then. So yeah, I can recommend it.
Thank you. The first query about the reception desk and vulnerability, we have done risk assessments on that desk. I think it's very interesting point actually that it's not labelled as such. And I'll take that back. We do continue to review those risk assessments. The link with the police is that the police don't sort of advertise that it is an open operating station for themselves, but they do offer to support as well. So if anybody does come in particularly asking for themselves and there's any sort of issues around that, they do offer to support us in sort of calming those situations down. The parish council reviews, very good point. I know, as you say, that we have offered services out to parish councils in the past and are happy to do that again as well. But I just wonder, I think we're doing a sort of programme of training for parish councils. I know we're due to do one shortly on licensing, and I wonder perhaps if health and safety is something that we could do, as well as if you might find that helpful. I can perhaps take back. And thank you. Yes, so the personal safety sessions for elected members, we do those regularly. It's the first time that we've used the LGA to support with that, and I think that was really useful. But I know I've done them sort of on an annual basis for quite a while now. But I think you a really valid point about the social media as well. Again, I think that was one of the first times that we've covered that in any great detail, and I think that was really useful, and particularly others sharing their experiences as well. So yeah, again, we can continue to build on that.
If I could just come in at that point, sorry, Chairman. Absolutely, as you expect, we are at the moment kind of building up the post-May election training programme for members. So we know we've got to hit some mandatory training, planning, licensing, etc. But we're also doing some of those other things. So picking up on kind of Wendy's report earlier, equality and diversity will be one of the training modules available for members. But absolutely, the personal safety training will look to run again for members post-May 2023.
Are there any other questions? Yes, Dr. Taylor.
Sorry, just slightly just comment. If you've ever been on a blood wagon going down a ski slope because you've injured yourself, I think you'll know what it's like going down on a evac thing down a staircase. And I'm amazed that the doctor's surgery is open on a Saturday. What? They're all closed on Saturdays. Bought. Perhaps on the occasion they do vaccinations or something like that. Sorry, that was as an ex-doctor, but we used to work Saturdays. Thank you.
Councillor Davis.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the report, Jenny. Very, very interesting. Thank you. Just one quick question: Is there a statutory requirement for sort of refresher training in first aid, or is it sort of done on a regular basis or whatever?
Yes, for our appointed first aiders, we're required to have, depending on how many employees you have and the risk of the work that's taking place, you're required to have an appointed number, and we do have that number. And if you need to do the course completely again, it's every 3 years that it needs to be refreshed. It's sort of a completely new course, but if you keep refreshing it, that's on an annual basis. So yes, it does need repeating. Yeah.
Thank you. Are there any other questions at all? Final comment from me, Jenny. I was expecting at some point with the changes around this building and some new members, I was expecting a fire drill at some point to catch the members out. Because I recall the last one that I took part in, and it was quite interesting to see members actually walking past fire exits to get to an area that they knew they could actually exit the building. And there were some comments about that, I think, at the time. So are you going to leave it now until the new council? Yeah, I thought you might.
Chairman.
Councillor Hingley, yeah.
Thank you. Just to say, when you were talking about disability, the disability toilet, is there any chance of having a table in there? I find there's nowhere to put your bag and stuff. Do you think that's possible?
I would need to have a look into that because I think there needs to be, I'd need to check against the regulations. I think there needs to be a clear area so that anybody who's in a wheelchair has ability to move around freely. We can definitely look into that. Yeah, even if it's a shelf or something like that, so it doesn't obscure floor area. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? I said to someone the other night, talking about facilities and toilet facilities, someone was making a bid for a baby changing unit. And my sense of humour always, what you're going to do, swap 2 boys for a girl, or, didn't go down too well. Are there any other questions at all? No? Well, thank you very much. I think that completes our agenda. This will be the last meeting of the Standards and Resources Committee for this council term, the 4-year term. It's a shame, really. It's been such a bad day in terms of the weather, and there's so few of us here. But I'd like to thank you all for your support and for your attendance at the meetings and your contribution in terms of all the questions. We've had some very comprehensive reports that speakers have put over very well, which we're very grateful for, and they've always raised quite a lot of questions. So thank you very much for that. Dr. Taylor, you were supposed to say?
Thank you very much indeed. I was going to say, is this the last meeting? Because it is exceedingly unlikely that you're pleased to see me again after 8 or 12 years on this committee. So I'm certainly not going up for election again. And anyway, you wouldn't appoint me as a parish council, because I'm always a nuisance. But thank you very much for your tolerance of me. I've enjoyed coming, and thank you.
Thank you, Dr. As I've said to you many times, I've always enjoyed your contribution to these meetings. Whether you think you're cantankerous or not, it's no matter. It always, as far as I'm concerned, it's always added a bit of colour to the meetings, and I've always enjoyed it. And I've had to chair meetings with far more obstructive people than yourself. Far more. I mean, one of the former employees of this council, David Pattison, who you know well, I think David is finding that working with Wolverhampton City Council is very different to working with South Staffordshire Council. And I used to chair quite a powerful committee for Wolverhampton City Council for a number of years, and believe me, some of those meetings were absolutely horrendous. Yeah. So again, thank you all very much. Those of you that are standing for election next year, I wish you all best of luck with your elections. Those that aren't, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure knowing you and working with you over these last few years. I'm sure that we shall meet up again at some point in the future. So thank you. And I'll formally close the meeting.